Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amy Roman, Chief Marketing and Sales Officer at Network Support Co. We are an IT managed services and cybersecurity provider with local, national, and international clients across 36 states. Joining me today are Buddy Pitt, our Director of Technical Development, and Bill Starbuck, Senior Business Development Manager. We're here today to talk about how to make remote work effective. So before we delve into the specific tools and solutions that we recommend, let's take a step back and look at how the recent coronavirus and pandemic has impacted remote work and business operations overall. Remote work and telecommuting have been around for quite a while, and their popularity, although varying from industry to industry, has increased slowly but steadily in recent years. When the government declared a state of emergency due to the coronavirus, businesses across industries rapidly transitioned to a remote workforce in order just to keep running. Now, prior to this situation, many may have thought of remote work as this ideal Shangri-La where we regained commuting time and made our own schedules. But the reality has looked a bit more like this. Not only were many companies unprepared for this transition, they had to do so at a time when they had many other dire issues on their mind, such as their overall business survival, as well as their and their families' personal health. As a result, they backed into a remote solution that is now causing employees frustration, is depleting their overall productivity, and is also potentially putting their business at risk to cyber attack. But it certainly doesn't have to work this way. And it's truly critical that we get this right, because all of the experts indicate that remote work in some degree is here to stay. These are just a few of the headlines from some widely known and respected media sources that speak to this exact fact. So now the question that's in front of us is how do we make remote work effective given it's here to stay? Well, the number one struggle that remote workers cite is a lack of communication and collaboration. Communication and collaboration is relatively easy when you're sitting nearby or in a face-to-face meeting. It becomes much more challenging when you're not able to walk over and ask someone a question or run an idea by them casually. And this dynamic becomes even more pronounced when you're working with team members who you may not know as well or who may be new to your organization. And this is by no means a minor issue. 86% of employees and executives alike cite lack of communication or collaboration as the key reason for workplace failures. So if you want your business initiatives to move forward and to ultimately succeed, you need to proactively facilitate keeping your employees connected. And I also want to note that tied for communication and collaboration as the number one struggle is loneliness. Now, besides the fact that we certainly want to ensure that our employees are safe and protected and happy in these challenging times, there's also a significant professional implication. It's one thing if you have a few remote workers, and then this issue is going to have a limited impact on the business. But when you have potentially entire teams working remotely or large percentages of teams working remotely, this can have a large impact on the overall corporate culture. Because when people are feeling lonely, they're feeling unengaged. And we've all seen the studies that our unengaged employees are our less productive employees. So these are some very real and some very impactful challenges. But the good news is that these challenges are certainly surmountable. And technology can be a big help. The right technology set up in the right way can ensure that your team operates just as effectively or almost as effectively as when everyone was in the office together. And to do so, it's really about setting it up in a way to ensure two key things. The first is easy and secure remote access. Your team needs to be able to access your data and your systems in a user-friendly way, and in doing so, not leave your company open to a cyber attack. And then the second is exactly what we've been talking about, communication and collaboration. Now, listening to what we've spoken about at this point, you may be thinking, I'm just going to throw a bunch of tools at this because I don't want to have that issue in my business. But this is actually one of those situations where more may not be better. It's not about how many tools you utilize. It's about carefully choosing the right set of tools that work together well so that employees are clear on which communication medium they should be using for which type of communication. So, Buddy, let's take a closer look at our first key concept, secure remote access. How do you set this up?
Setting up remote connectivity is all about managing and balancing the ease of use for our end users with the privacy and security concerns of the organization. So basically, you want your team to be able to access the systems and the data that they need to do their jobs, but also keep them safe from cyber criminals and other threats that are out there. To do this, there's not really a one-size-fits-all type of a solution for this. It's going to vary based on the type of business that you're in, what your regulatory environment looks like. And a big piece is if you're running software as a service or like cloud-based applications to run your business versus having servers in your local office. So, as we evaluate the scene, we could make recommendations on what might be a good solution for you.
Thanks, Buddy. You mentioned cyber criminals. We're hearing a lot about increased cyber attacks around COVID-19 and our remote workforces. What do we need to know about this issue?
So anytime we have a news headline that makes national news, or in this case, world level headlines, cyber criminals will take the opportunity to use the news to execute phishing campaigns. So, some of the things that we can do to really thwart those attacks is to make sure that we're getting our news and information from sources that we trust. But more importantly, that we're the ones that are initiating the connections to those sources. So we're going to the website to read those articles, not waiting for them to land into our inbox. Because phishing is really still one of the biggest threats out there. 86% of companies have said that they've detected phishing attacks. I'm guessing 14% haven't realized that they're being phished. But this is a way that cyber criminals, a tactic that they use to get people to voluntarily give up information, like their usernames and passwords, or even in some cases access to their computers. So I have an example of what one of these phishing emails around COVID might look like. This is a play on a story that was in the news about Tom Hanks and his wife testing positive for COVID-19. In this email here, it looks like it's from People magazine, and it has, it's a story based on, with photos of Tom Hanks in quarantine. But really, this is not from People magazine. And there's a couple of things wrong with this if we look at it. First, in the from address, it says People magazine, but the actual email address is news@magazines-people.com. Probably not the right domain for People magazine. Second, if you hover your mouse over the images in the email or any links in there, without clicking, it'll show you where that link is actually going. And you can see that this link clearly isn't going to peoplemagazine.com. It's actually going to one of our training portals. So this is an email that we use to train people to identify emails like this. But the idea of this is that there's going to be many variations of emails like this. So as a general rule, if it lands in your inbox and you haven't requested that piece of information, you probably don't want to click on it, and you should go to that news source directly to get it.
So, Buddy, with all of this cyber criminal activity happening, what is the best way to secure a remote workforce?
So the best way to stay secure at a time like this is to start with having a plan or a strategy. So when you know that you're going to be sending a portion of your workforce home or your entire workforce home, what we want to do is start to scope that out and see what it looks like. So we're going to first look at who needs access. So are we talking about 100% of your workforce? Is that 20 people? Is it 100 people? Do you only have to enable 20% of your workforce to work remotely? So we want to try to start to scope the size, and then we want to look at what are the necessary performance standards. In this area, we're going to be discussing the assets or applications that we need to supply remote access to, how much bandwidth they need, how much resources they need, and how do we meet the performance standards so that the applications work the way that they should when users are accessing them remotely. An example of this might be if you have servers hosted in your office and you're now going to send 100 people to work from home and all you have is a cable modem, we might have bandwidth concerns. If you only have so much capacity on whatever's running your VPN software, we might have to upgrade capacity. So we're going to assess what the performance standards are. Then we're going to look at those capacity requirements combined with this. Again, this is going to vary greatly if you're using SaaS-based applications that everyone is already accessing this. These are applications like Office 365 or G Suite, online applications that you access in a web browser. Those are very easy to enable. If we're talking about applications in your office again, it's going to be a different type of solution. Then we're going to look at the level of confidentiality that's needed. And what we're really talking about with confidentiality is the audit requirements that we have, or the regulatory environment that you're in. Do you have credit cards where you have PCI requirements that you need to meet? Or are you a healthcare operation that has HIPAA requirements, or a defense contractor that has DFARS requirements? We want to make sure that the remote access solutions that we're putting in place meet the requirements so that you don't get points on your audit, or don't get a certification that you need to maintain. And then there's a human factor to this too. So a lot of the times in this situation, we're sending people to go work from home, and this might be the first time that they've had to do this. So having a simple guide for them to follow about how to start their VPN client, how to get connected, how to launch those applications that they need can be extremely helpful. But more importantly, we want them to have access to a support line that they can get help in real time. And this will allow them to be able to make that call when they're trying to connect and get in touch with the support person. Because that's just a really frustrating thing when you're trying to get connected and stuff's not working. So I want to make sure we have that support line for them to call for help.
Excellent. That's certainly a lot to think about. So weighing all of these various issues, what are some best practices that businesses can implement to stay cyber secure?
Sure. So when we look at some of the best practices, we're talking here about the cybersecurity best practices. So this is how to do everything in the most secure way. Of course, there's other things that come into play like budget and stuff like that. That's really important. So as we go through these, remember that we're talking about best practices, and we could always make adjustments and give and take on some of these things. But the most important thing is to start by providing corporate-owned devices. And the reason that we like to provide the devices as an organization is because it enables us to also maintain and manage those devices. So we don't have to give users, full admin access on them. We can make sure that the software that's running on them is patched and up to date, and that it's the latest version of Windows or Office, and that the device itself is in a secure environment. We might enable policies for encryption on that device. We want to make sure that we're using VPN software. Now, with VPN software, it's a great idea to use when you're using that corporate-owned device where we know that we're managing the antivirus software and that it's secure. To put VPN software on a user's home computer might not be the best idea. The reason is because we don't know that that device is secure. We don't know that it's being patched, that it has a current antivirus, that it's not infected with something. So when we connect that device to a corporate network, that could allow malicious software or hackers that might be in that device or have control over it to transition onto the corporate network. So corporate-owned devices combined with that VPN is a good solution. If we're using users' home devices, we might want to consider some alternatives to a VPN software. Combined with this, particularly if we're using cloud-based applications like Google's G Suite or Microsoft 365, we want to require multi-factor authentication. What this is it's a second factor of authentication, so username and password being one factor, a SMS code or a code that you generate on your phone being a second factor, or an RSA key that you carry with you to generate that code. And what we're protecting against here is credential theft. As we read the news and we hear about all of these data breaches that occur, the number one thing that's stolen out of these, like from LinkedIn or Yahoo or even Equifax, is usernames and passwords, account usernames and passwords. And then the hackers take that email address or username and password combination, and they try it on all these different sites, knowing that people reuse their usernames and passwords. So requiring multi-factor authentication prevents that attack. Today, Microsoft is seeing over 300 million they're called credential stuffing attacks happening every day. 99.9% of those are being thwarted through multi-factor. So I would require that for any type of data access. Combined with that, set in password policies. So knowing those passwords are being stolen, we want to put some regulation around 3 key areas of passwords. Number one, the complexity of them. So we want to make sure that you have uppercase, lowercase, numbers, non-alphanumeric characters, etc. in them. We want to make sure that they're long enough, that they're 8 or 10 or 12 characters long. And then we want to set a duration that they're good for. So we don't want a password that's created to be to never expire and be good forever. We want them to expire after 60 days or 90 days or 120 days, but some duration of time that password has to be changed. And one of the most important things that we can do is implement security awareness training. We talked about the phishing email with Tom Hanks earlier in this, and what security awareness training allows us to do is put those emails in front of our users and employees and let them be trained on them. Let them identify what's wrong with that email. If someone clicks on that training email that I showed earlier, we get a report on that. It allows us to offer more training or coaching for that user. And it takes a little bit of time, but you build a knowledge base in your users and they become your greatest cybersecurity asset. Implementing security awareness training programs can stop a cybersecurity attack and reduce that risk, right there.
Some helpful security best practices, Buddy. Thank you. So now I'd like to move on to our second key concept. Bill, can you tell us a bit more about fostering communication and collaboration?
Absolutely, Amy. To have effective communication and collaboration while working remote, we need to replicate the office environment as closely as possible using technology. Because you don't have the ability to share the same office, video meetings can be used to replace the face-to-face meetings. On-the-fly communication via instant messaging replaces that casual hallway or water cooler conversation. Project management software keeps the project teams going and collaborating as if they were right next to each other. And document management allows teams to share, create, and access and change documents together in real time.
Okay, so Bill, you mentioned 4 key infrastructure pillars, the first one being video meetings. They certainly have gained in popularity in recent months, and there have been some pretty significant issues around them. Why are they so critical, and what do we need to know about setting them up?
Video meetings are critical to keep employees connected because they allow you to see the body language and facial expressions, which are key aspects to communication. You can use these services to have all types of meetings, whether it's one-on-ones, team meetings, company-wide meetings, or even client and prospect presentations. The top 3 video meeting services we recommend are Zoom, Teams, and Google Meet. Zoom and Teams tend to be more business focused, where Google Meet is more education and classroom focused. Most video meeting services have both a paid for and a free version available. The free version often has limitations such as duration and the maximum number of attendees. So for a small gathering, this might be perfect, but for larger organizations, it might not be adequate. Regardless of which solution you select, you want to make sure that you keep security top of mind. This means do not share or post publicly the access information, a common mistake that led to a lot of Zoom bombings or drop-ins about a month or so ago. Lastly, don't forget to use these services to have some fun. Many businesses are setting up meetings for coffee breaks or even a special happy hour such as wear a fun hat.
Okay, Bill, you also mentioned a second infrastructure pillar, tools to replace casual hallway and water cooler conversations. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, when you're in the office, there's a lot of informal communication. Someone may stop by your office and ask a quick question about a project, or to check the status of a client inquiry, or to clarify a point after a meeting. When you are remote, you don't have this luxury. This makes instant messaging a key component to working remotely. The top services we would recommend are Teams, Slack, or perhaps a unified communication tool. Teams and Slack are software services where unified communication is a broader term, which would be a service or software that might be provided by your phone vendors, such as Cisco, Windstream, or Mitel. A fun fact about Teams, as of March 18th, there were 44 million daily users. A month later, there were 75 million daily users. That was an increase of 70%. Many companies may actually already have access to Teams if they have a Microsoft Office 365 account. To make instant messaging even more fun, we suggest creating groups or channels of communication such as sales, loan officers, clerks, or even something fun like study break. So you can see these tools can help your team stay connected professionally as well as personally. Here are a few examples of how we use Teams and using instant messaging to communicate within the office and have some fun. The following were posted in our Silver Lining team channel. There's a lot of bad news out there these days, so we created this channel to share some lighthearted thoughts. My favorites are the Zoom meeting showing the difference between audio only and with video on the left, or in the center, an image detailing the coronavirus and how it's turned us all into dogs. We're roaming the house for food, we're told no when we get close to strangers, and we get excited about going on a car ride. My least favorite is the panel on the right.
Well, for the record, the panel on the right is definitely the team's favorite. So what about projects, Bill? It's critical that we keep them moving forward in these times, and this can become really challenging, especially when you have multiple initiatives and multiple team members involved, some of whom are working remote and some of whom may be in the office. How do we best handle that?
Keeping projects moving forward while working remotely is hugely important and can be challenging. Project management software helps you keep all employees focused, on task, and sets clear expectations. This is especially important for complicated projects with multiple tasks and with multiple parties involved. Managers and team members can assign tasks, get notifications on what your team and stakeholders are working on in real time, and communicate in the context with every task. Some features of project management software include timelines and dashboards for visual confirmation of project statuses. Two popular project management solutions are Microsoft Planner and Monday. We actually use Microsoft Planner to put this webinar together. Here's our example. Here you can see a screenshot of Amy's planner and her current projects. This dashboard allowed her to sort her projects by importance, timing, etc. Planner also integrates with Teams in Microsoft Office 365. And here is all the information associated with creating this specific webinar, for the chambers. We use Project Planner to assign tasks with due dates and set priorities. We updated internal notes, we created checklists, and we marked items complete. We also included attachments and links to important information. Keeping all this information in one place was just great.
Now let's move on to the fourth and final infrastructure pillar, document management. What do we need to know, Bill?
Document management is all about establishing a central repository. A solution like this allows everyone to have access to the latest version and for multiple people to work on the same document at the same time. Importantly, managers can control access and set permissions to files within the system. Other key features might include advanced search options, such as keywords, not just file names, and mobile access. Three popular options are Microsoft 365, the G Suite, and Dropbox. So this is an example of central repository, which in this case is SharePoint. SharePoint allows all users to access files and documents from any location, at any time, and from any device. Some other important features are versioning and history review. We also use Office 365, a suite of integrated services and applications that not only enables us to access the document management repository from any of these applications, it can also be used to tie all four communications and collaboration infrastructure pillars together. So it brings the individual applications functionality and ties them together so data and knowledge flow through the application seamlessly. providing and delivering a secure, manageable, and cohesive experience for the end user.
Thanks, Bill. You've shared a lot of helpful information about how we can enable remote workers to communicate and collaborate effectively. So this brings us to the end of our portion of the presentation. It looks like we do have a few questions from the audience. I'm seeing one from Brian. So glad you're liking the information, Brian. Brian's question is, why does NSC prefer Teams over Zoom or Google Meet? Buddy, would you like to take that one?
So we use Teams because we are very integrated with Office 365. So Teams allows us to not only communicate internally through the chat and messaging, but also host our meetings, so we can have multiple meetings within Teams itself. So it's worked great for us as we've been working remotely, and then being able to do live events right in that same system has been a tremendous asset as well. So that's why we use Teams. It's just very well integrated with the rest of the systems and programs that we use. Anything else, Amy?
Looks like we do have another question about hardware. Do we need any additional hardware to use the video conferencing applications?
So as far as hardware goes, and in most cases, you don't need additional hardware if you have a laptop or a mobile device. A lot of the hardware comes into that, and really what hardware you need in addition to the compute power is the microphone and the camera piece. So if you have a desktop computer that doesn't have a microphone and a camera, you can buy little USB ones that connect to be able to do the video portion. If you only have a microphone, you can still do audio conferences through the computer. Really the only additional hardware to purchase would be microphone and cameras to be able to do the video part. Other than that, you should be good to go.
Seems pretty straightforward. And our last question is really about the security of Zoom. As I had mentioned before, a lot of people have read about Zoom bombing and other issues with that. Is Zoom secure, Buddy?
So Zoom being secure is kind of a loaded question, because Zoom is a piece of software. So like anything else, if we took a Windows server and just deployed it and didn't do anything to secure it, it's not going to be secure out of the box. So we had a lot of things publicized, and just to take a step back with Zoom, they had a user base that used them constantly. As we went into this this lockdown section, the user base, much like Teams, Bill mentioned a 70% increase in users of Teams earlier. Zoom experienced the same thing, and a lot of the users that jumped on there didn't really understand how to secure the software. And on Zoom side, they didn't have security as the default settings. So what people were doing is they were creating meetings. They were publishing their meeting IDs in public places where they could be found. And there's a term for it on Google. I think it's actually called geeking or something. But you can put stuff into Google that searches for something like a Zoom meeting ID. So hackers were able to find them pretty easily if they were published, and then they would drop in on the meetings and post photos or scream obscenities or whatever they were doing in there. So there was certainly a component of people just not using the software in a secure way, and hackers took advantage of their inexperience with it. They did have some other key features, like some encryption issues where they were using 128-bit encryption that was deemed to be reversible in some way. It was limited to certain servers. I think they were based in China. So they ended up getting a lot of bad press over this, but a lot of it had to do with the user's implementation of it. Now, a lot of the technical issues have been addressed in a release of Zoom 5.0 software, which was released at the end of April. So that's rolling out this month. By the end of this month, about now or so, it should be completely rolled out. So you want to make sure you're using the latest versions of Zoom as well. It's regardless of what the issues were in the past, the company was really impressive in how fast they fixed a lot of that stuff. So I would say today, make sure you're using the latest software. One other piece that was a major security risk with Zoom was that hackers were taking the Zoom meeting software and repackaging it and then sending meeting invites out with this software, meaning that there was malware that would enable remote access or something into that package that you had to run to launch Zoom. But this is another case of phishing. These meeting invites were sent out via phishing emails, and they were trying to get users to click on them, thinking they were just joining a meeting. And when they were doing that, the software would actually function normally, but they would have installed, something that would allow the attacker any, a remote access to that machine. So a lot of the risks were still user-based, although the major security risks that we saw and heard about that were with the Zoom software itself have been closed at this point.
Great. So it sounds like Zoom is secure. We just need to be aware and be on our guard and careful. So doesn't look like we have any additional questions. This really concludes our session today. Thank you, everyone. We certainly appreciate you joining us. As we move into reopening, we hope that you're walking away from this with an understanding of the importance of setting up a high-functioning remote work environment and the key strategies and tools that you should consider to set that up. Please know that our team's focus during these challenging times is to be of service to the local and to the broader business community. So you are welcome to contact us to schedule time with one of our in-house technology experts. We're offering this as a pro bono service during these times. You can go to the contact us page of our website, network-support.com, or we've also provided Bill's direct contact information, and he'll make sure that he puts you in touch with the right person within our organization. We're in this together, and we're here to help. Thanks again.